Okay, back again for more chip reviews after a brief hiatus. Thank you for joining me once again. Before we get into the content of this particular episode, I would just like to let everybody know that this happened over the weekend. Came and gone fairly quickly. You need to pay attention and act fast because these things don't last. Now, none of these chips were particularly exciting, but they sure did make for some great packaging. And hopefully, because I looked in the bag and there's some exciting things on the horizon, that today's bag of chips is going to be a bit more compelling. Now, you missed those, too bad, but there's going to be a few more happening before this whole thing is over. And yes, there's going to be an ending to this. Not going to be doing this forever, as wonderful as it is. There's a shelf life to it, and I don't want to play it out. Now, just to reiterate before we get into the chip of the day, the reason I'm doing this shit in the first place is because I have been offered money by Instagram to participate in the Reels Play bonus program, which is basically Instagram is desperate not to be made irrelevant by TikTok, so they're really pushing certain idiot creators to really lean in and make as many fucking reels as possible, and they're offering cash money for you to do that. And if you get a certain amount of plays, you get a significant payout up to like $1,200. Now, I have not achieved that number because I remain shadow banned. I've done a little research on this to just understand what that means, and apparently shadow banning can last up to 3 months. It's basically you will not show up in the explore page if you are shadow banned. You're only going to be shown to your subscribers, if that. And what I just discovered was that posting a video of yourself kissing somebody else on the mouth with tongue violates the community standards and therefore earns you a shadow banning. So by the time I finish with all these fucking chips, the shadow banning is still going to persist. So the way you make the real money is winding up in the fucking explore page, which isn't going to happen. So it kind of defeats the purpose, or at least the original purpose. But as this has been going on, as I'm sure you've noticed, that this is not even really about potato chips, and that there's a subtext and a metatext that has emerged here, which should be obvious to everybody. And that's the real reason why I'm persisting with this. So with all that update out of the way, and by the way, I'm still covering my head because I'm recovering from my seemingly successful cosmetic scalp treatment, I did get some wacky hats in the mail, which I'm going to be debuting a little later on in the broadcasts as they persist. But enough of all of that. You knew that already. I just had to clarify for those who may just be tuning in for the first time. Now let's get into the chips. Hopefully these are going to be exciting. I'm optimistic about the next batch here. And yes, I've been looking forward to this. These are roasted cumin and lamb skewer flavor. Now, these are also Chinese chips. Yes, specifically from Shanghai. That's interesting. Although, if I'm to understand correctly, if these Chinese chips, and most of the Chinese chips have been the standouts. The Thai chips, not so much. The Taiwanese chips, we don't want to talk about them. And they have not been as interesting and bold and radical as this Chinese chips. And what's interesting is that they seem to be going for a regional cuisine here. I mean, we had my favorite ones thus far. My favorite ones thus far have been the Sichuan hot pot potato chips. And these, if I'm to understand correctly, slapping. Fucking slapping. Fantastic. Very, very strong flavor, not only of cumin, but the lamb fat. I don't know if that's in the ingredients. You know what? I don't want to know. I really don't want to know how they did this, but this has a meat taste, and the cumin is bold as fuck. They committed to it. And these are absolutely fantastic. I'd like to also point out how awesome the bag design is. It's this very rich sort of royal purple with this purple chrome foil detail here. It's a very, very psychedelic color scheme, and I'm very excited to make an action figure out of this. Now, what's been really interesting is just sort of the different regional cuisines that these Chinese chips have been striving for. If I'm not mistaken, this is a flavor from Western China. China's a big-ass fucking country, and the western edge of it butts up against Central Asia, which is mostly Muslim, and they don't eat pork, and they eat lamb instead, and this sort of flavor profile is a little bit more of a Middle Eastern vibe. There's a chain of restaurants here in New York called Jian Foods that specializes in Western Chinese food, not meaning westernized Chinese food, but food and cuisine from the western end of China. And it does have more of a sort of Middle Eastern flavor profile. And it's really interesting that Lay's China is really delving into that. It's so much more interesting than the bland offerings that we get here in America, although it's really hard to eat these and think about that part of China and not acknowledge that there's a fucking genocide going on against the Uyghur people who are Muslim. And one of the things about eating all these international chips is that it's kind of very difficult to separate them from geopolitics and all the fucked up shit that's going on in the world. So there's a little bit of a bitterness that goes along with this otherwise fucking smashing flavor. 10 out of 10.